Hey Mark, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Clarence?
I'm great. I'm hanging out in the gorgeous mountains of Telluride. I got my sweater on. It's a little chilly. It's getting dark. You know,
Getting ready for ski season.
yeah, there you go. I just can't leave this beautiful place.
It is hard.
It is very hard. So it was good to see you back at the festival at the Telluride Film Festival for the 50th anniversary after you took a skip year.
So I took a something like a nosedive, basically. But yeah, it was good to be back and see everybody. A lot of good films that I know we're about to talk about. So yeah, good seeing you and the whole crew.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump right into those films. I'm going to pull up my list of what I saw because I keep trying
Yeah,
to recount to people what I did see because we saw a lot of movies. I guess one
yeah,
thing I'll start with, and I think you would agree with this, but the I saw a lot. We saw a lot of movies. You saw more than I did, of course, but I think partially due to my own fault. But we won't talk about
oh,
that on this podcast.
we'll,
Um,
we'll leave that out of it.
we'll leave that out. I saw a lot of films, all of them good, at least good.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't see anything that I really hated. I didn't see anything that I
Mm,
even disliked. There were certainly things I preferred. There were things I
yeah,
thought that were personally better films than others, but I liked everything I saw.
yeah.
Did you have the same experience?
Yeah, I saw 12 films total, and all 12, when I entered them into Rotten Tomatoes, I gave them the fresh score. So nothing that I would say was bad. Certainly films were better than others and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
as usual, but yeah, nothing bad. It was good. It was a very solid, deep festival. And I'm sure there's a ton that I missed that was also great. So
Well, I feel so bad for only getting to 8.5.
and a half. That's
And a
awesome.
half. Yes, half of well, we'll talk about that one when it comes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
let's kind of walk people through our experience. So we started the festival on Thursday. And we were able to attend the patrons brunch, fortunately. Um,
Yeah.
and I think if there's a podcast that's going to be out there somewhere where it talks about the patrons brunch. But after the patrons brunch, where you and I hobnobbed with Laura Linney and Julie Louis Dreyfus and Emerald Fennel, and who else? Well, we
Jeff
saw Steve
Nichols.
McQueen, but neither one of us had the guts to go up and talk to
It
him.
was a little intimidating. We met Jeff Nichols as well, and
Yes,
Sandra Mula, if I
yes,
said that right.
yes, and a
I've been
couple of
practicing my
shorts directors who were kind of just
yeah,
bewildered and
right.
standing around.
Yeah, yeah,
So after
very
that, they
cool.
have a specific patron screening, and a patron is, of course, people who essentially pay a lot of money to attend this festival. Um, and the patron screening this year was Jeff Nichols, The Bike Rider. So why don't you tell us about what that film is about?
So that is about the founding of, I think it's one of if not the first biker gang in the Midwest. I think they held out of Chicago and had other chapters in Milwaukee and whatnot. But Tom Hardy stars as kind of a Marlon Brando in The Wild Ones, right?
Yep.
It is The Wild Ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's like inspired by Brando in that film, and you could tell his performance is inspired as well. He plays the leader of this gang, and Austin Butler from Elvis plays kind of more the James Dean cool sidekick, um, best friend, whatnot of Austin Butler, and Jodie Comer plays his, I think, wife. I think they're married, right? Because she
They
says
do
something
get
about like
married.
5 weeks later we're married. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she plays the wife and kind of narrates the film, kind of a Lorraine Bracco Goodfellas kind of vibe was kind of what a few of us took away right away from the film was kind of a Goodfellas for bike gangs, but it's beautifully shot. Jeff Nichols, everything he's done so far, I haven't had a single miss from him. I'm a huge fan of Take Shelter and Mud.
Mm-hmm.
Those are probably my two favorites, and most I think a lot of people would agree on those two. And but the Bike Riders is right up there. It was a great way to start the festival. I definitely want to see it again. It's one of the ones that's in the upper half of what I saw. What about you?
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I was I don't know that I was. This wasn't high on my list of things to see in the festival, so it kind of it's good to start those kind of the festival experience with something that you kind of want to get out of the way, right? I mean, it's I don't want to, the way that they schedule these things is literally on the first night of the festival, Thursday night, there were 6 or 7 premieres back to back to back to back, and obviously
Right.
we can't split each other in half and go off to 2 different films
Yeah.
at once. So it was good to see this on a non-competitive slot, um, because it surprised me. I am touch and go on some of his films. I love Take Shelter. Loving it probably wasn't as wild about, but and I respect his
Yeah.
vision. I respect his craft. I respect his writing. But this one I thought was if not a home run, a very 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 good film. It showed me a world that I knew nothing about. I found it
Yeah.
interesting. I found the performances all good. I mean, I know there were some people who were a bit lukewarm, or maybe that's being mild, on Jodie Comer. I thought Jodie Comer was fantastic. I mean, it's an exaggerated accent. She's got a sort of working class Chicago accent. It's exaggerated. It's very sort of, some people compared it to something you should see on Saturday Night Live. I didn't bother me. I mean, I got used to it. At first it was the very first scene that
Yeah.
she's in. I'm like, what is going on here? But I thought she gave the film's best performance, honestly.
I did too. I thought she was the best part of it. And I would say for those who are old like us and grew up on, reruns maybe of Laverne and Shirley,
Sure.
that's kind of the vibe I got from her accent, was kind of that Milwaukee, Chicago
Hmm.
hybrid. And I thought she was great. And again, it's an accent that I've heard many times. I am in the Midwest, right? So in Ohio. So it's definitely an accent that I'm familiar with and have heard. And I think she nailed it. And I know a lot of people weren't as big a fan. I think they were maybe hearing a little bit of the New York, New Jersey kind of vibe from it and didn't
Mm.
pair it up based on what I had conversations with several people about. But yeah, I think she nailed it. I think she was the best part of the film.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we go through these films, I kind of want to talk about the awards trajectory here, kind of where we think this film could, where these films that we talk about, the films that we saw, could show up potentially within the awards race. And Bike Riders, I think, is probably one of, unfortunately, I think the strongest bet here may be screenplay. Um, I think it's, if it weren't 20th Century Fox, and if I didn't think Disney was probably going to bury this film, um, I would say it has a better shot. But it's just probably one of those things where it's a very well made film that probably slips through the cracks,
So basically, like every other Jeff Nichols film, right? Because I don't think
unfortunately.
any of
So
his films. I think Loving got a couple nominations,
and I
maybe
got Ruth Nega for Best Actress, right?
if I remember. But Ruth Nega, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But Take Shelter. I don't remember that getting anything. And Mud, I'm pretty sure didn't. But they all, screenplay for sure is what they all have in common. They're well written, well acted films. So I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I don't think this is an awards player. Not that it shouldn't be, and I'd be very pleasantly surprised if it did show up in the awards race, but it does feel like the type of film that kind of gets underappreciated and then grows a following over time.
Rediscovered. Sure.
Yeah.
Um, all right. Then we saw Como Domingo and Rustin. So why don't you tell us about,
Yeah.
or actually you did the you did the intro for Bike Rider, so I'll talk
Yeah. I'm
about Rustin.
terrible. I'm terrible at describing films. So you
No,
go
that's
ahead.
you did a great job. So Rustin, as I said, stars Coleman Domingo as Bayard Rustin, who was sort of the unsung hero of the 1963, was it? 1960,
Mm. Yeah.
1963
'63.
March on Washington for Civil Rights. This was before Martin Luther King was assassinated, before sort of there was a huge push. Kennedy was still in office. There was before the huge push for the 1965 Civil Rights Bill. And it's a film about coming together as a group. It's about um, positive change. It's about building an organization, building a um, a movement. And so there's a lot of scenes about the orchestration, the detail that goes into community organization, community planning. Uh, and the reason to see the film is for Coleman Domingo's performance, I would say. He is a lock for best actor. He may be the front runner. What do you think?
Hard to argue that. Yeah, I think his performance was absolutely the central reason to see the movie. I thought he was great. I really liked, and I can't remember the actor's name, but the actor that plays Martin Luther King, I thought was great too. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a feel good movie. It's a good crowd pleasing type film. There's a couple of those, surprisingly. Telluride's not typically a crowd pleasing type film place, although I guess they had King Richard a couple years ago too. So,
They did.
but yeah, it's definitely like a crowd pleasing, feel good, great story that enlightens us on, like you said, a historic figure that has kind of been swept under the rug by the NAACP primarily. A lot of it is due to his communist backgrounds, and controversially, he was, controversial at the time. He's a gay black man of that era, so I think he, for a lot of reasons, might have been thought of as a little bit of an embarrassment, but he was a huge figure. And talking, I got to attend the Netflix dinner thanks to you. You got me the invite, so I appreciate it. But I got to go to that Rustin party, and George C. Wolfe, the director, was there and was speaking to, the concept of those who have stood up in the face of injustice, and just, good enlightening conversation.
That's amazing. Yeah. Rustin comes from Netflix. I think there's going to be a strong push. You could see this in Best Picture because it does come from the Obama's Higher Ground campaign
Yeah.
or production company. Um, you could see a screenplay, but Coleman Domingo, I think, is, across the
Yeah.
season will receive mentions.
Yep. No question.
All right. And then after that, we saw my most anticipated film of the festival, which was Emerald Fennell's Saltburn.
You're a good friend, Emerald Fennell,
My good friend
right?
Emerald. Oh, okay.
Uh,
Uh um this one was a
who we
wild film.
met, who we met, we met her a couple times, once at the
Yes.
brunch and once at the party. I think it was an Amazon party or something, right?
Yeah.
And she was
And
very gracious, very friendly, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
Very, very
I'm
nice
gonna leave it
person.
at that.
Oh God, let's not make this out more
Yeah.
than it needs to be. Um this is I don't want to go to I don't even want to talk too much about this film. It's a film that
Yeah.
I liked. I saw it twice actually because I wanted to kind of absorb it,
That's right.
right?
Okay.
um I don't want to spoil anything because I think every time I've started talking about this film to people that haven't seen it, I'm like, oh, I can't talk about that because I don't want to spoil that. Oh, I can't talk about it's a ride. Let's just say that it's a ride. It's a little bit of Talented Mr. Ripley take that goes in a very different direction from Talented Mr. Ripley, I would say. But you were a huge fan of this film.
Yeah. Yeah. I left not sure what my favorite film of the festival was. I was kind of between Saltburn and Poor Things, and I really liked Anatomy of a Fall. I think those three are the three that kind of, that's like the upper echelon of what I saw. And I can't really tell you which one was my favorite, but this is among them. And I think a big part of it is Barry Keoghan. I've loved him since what was it, Killing of a Sacred Deer,
Mm-hmm.
and every role he's had since then, like Dunkirk and Banshees. He kind of just steals the show with simple, small performances. I think The Green Knight he's into and has a little small moment in that as a weirdo that the night's passing through, and anyway, everything Barry Keoghan's been in, he's just fascinating to look at. I don't. It's really hard to explain, but he's an interesting to look at, extremely well acted individual. So, um, seeing the movie kind of takes place through his point of view, and it was just fascinating. It's disturbing and wild, and There's quite a few scenes that are shocking and not for all audiences, but it's, as much as we can say, yes, there's traits of talented Mr. Ripley in there. It's also, I would also say, it's a kind of a wholly original film in a lot of ways. Like it didn't,
Yes.
I don't know that there's anything like it that I've seen that I can say.
Yeah, no, and I don't. I only. I mean, people are going to invariably make those Ripley comparisons, but it is a very different
Yeah,
beast than Ripley. Um, it
yeah.
goes in a lot of different places.
Social climber. It's a social climber kind of,
Yeah,
in a way, situation like Talented Mr. Ripley or All About Eve, those kind of films.
yeah. Um, I saw it twice, which I think should says something about the
Yeah,
fact that I found the film palatable. I didn't, and I found it continuously entertaining on the second pass. There are some things that I'm wrestling with the film that I'm not going to talk about here, but once people start to see it, we can maybe talk about it
yeah,
at a later point.
yeah.
Um,
Good idea.
you know, I really don't know sort of what the awards trajectory for this one is. I mean, I think it
Yeah,
could go it could go as big. I don't know that it goes bigger than Promising Young Woman, but we'll see what the reaction is.
it could do the same.
Yeah, it could do
It
the
could do the
same,
same,
or it
right?
could be left out completely. I mean, I know that's
Yeah.
not
Nope.
extraordinarily helpful, but
No, that's I completely agree. Like if they love it, and I think this is the argument I'd make because I think Sasha mentioned that she didn't think it was much of an Oscar player. And I again can't argue with that. And if anybody knows, it's Sasha. But I would say, when you think about the preferential ballot and what type of film gets in, it's the films a lot of times that have the passion vote behind it. And I could
Mhm.
definitely see Saltburn having that, right? It's a movie that is going to be very divisive. How do you say it? You say it
I
better
say
than me. I always
divisive.
say divisive. I like that. It's very divisive. So, it's one of those types of movies. But when you're divisive, I can't say it, so I'm just going to say divisive. Sorry. When you're divisive like that, you have the two extremes. You have people who are like, oh my God, it's awful. And then you have the people that love it and will swear by it and it speaks to them. And I think that's the type of movie that a lot of times, can sneak into the best picture race. Can it win? I don't think there's much shot of it winning picture. It would
Mhm.
be, I mean, after Everything Everywhere All at Once winning last year, maybe the Academy is more hip and open to films like this. But, I think it could get a lot of nominations, or like you said, it could get none. But I think its best shots are picture director, screenplay. Again, probably screenplay. Its best shot. It's a crowded actor field. Otherwise, I'd maybe say Barry. I could see something like Rosamund Pike sneaking in for supporting actress. She's so good in it. And if that category weakens up a little bit, I could see her being the like acting representative from the film. Production design
Yeah.
seems like it could, not just what's going on at school, but the mansion. Saltburn is the name of uh, uh how do you say his name? Jacob Elordi's
Jacob Elordi.
family
Yeah.
in the films. It's their estate.
Yep.
Lordy. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. So who knows? I think if I had to bet on anything, screenplay and production design, probably its best shots.
Cinematography too. And which is your hero, right?
That's right.
Linus.
Lena Sandgren, which we got to meet as well at the party and
Mhm.
speak to for quite some time. He was very, very cool dude and very friendly. And when he heard about, for those who don't know, I'm a huge Damien Chazelle fan, especially La La Land and First Man. And he shot both of those, won the Oscar for La La Land. So when he found out that I was an enormous fan of that, he like kind of took me in pretty quickly and, just had a great conversation. So while you were off talking to, I think, Emerald or somebody at the time. So
I don't know.
for
Somebody.
most of it, maybe.
I don't know who
I don't
you're
know.
talking about. Um, I I'm not going to put this in my five, but I could see a scenario where, thanks to Priscilla and Saltburn, Jacob Elordi may be in the conversation somewhere. Um,
Yeah.
because he does give a really good performance in the
Yeah.
film. His character is part of the problem that I have with the film, and I'm going to stop it right there because again, I'm not going to
Okay.
spoil anything, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think he's very good. in the film.
Yeah, I do.
All right, very good. And then we went to see The Holdovers, which is
Yes.
Alexander Payne's return to filmmaking. Did not write the screenplay, but directed a film starring Paul Giamatti as a boarding school teacher who is stuck with caring for a small group of young men who are left at the school over the Christmas holidays due to various reasons. Um, First of all, it's Alexander Payne's best film since a long time. Sideways, About Schmidt,
Sideways.
somewhere around there. Sideways,
Yeah.
yeah.
I would say Sideways, yeah.
It's a very sweet, engaging, funny film that also features a tremendous performance by not only Paul Giamatti, Dominic Sessa, who plays the young man that he's most closely aligned with, but also Divine Joy Randolph, who takes a role that I was so afraid was going to be just a stereotypical maid type role, and creates such a beautiful character. So much care was gone into her character and to her performance, that I right now I do have her in my top five because I think she's
Yeah.
fantastic in there. And I just don't, if
Yeah.
you and I have talked about, I think we both think that The Holdovers will be well viewed in Academy types. And I don't know how
Yeah.
you like this film without liking Divine Joy Randolph.
She's the best part. She's kind of the heart and soul of it. And,
Mm.
you know, yeah, I think they're all great, all three of them. And I know you mentioned Dominic Sessa. It's his first job acting on anything shot. So, never was in commercials even or TV or film. It's his first job. They actually got him from one of the schools that they were filming at. He was part of the theatrical department or something. And they were so impressed with him that they cast him. And he will blow you away when you take into consideration, especially that it's his first role. But yeah, all three are great. Screenplay's great. Like you said, I think it's Payne's best since Sideways, and it's definitely the type of film. I think I have it 7 on my list for Oscars
Yeah.
for Best Picture. So, you know, for where we're at in the race right now, I would definitely feel confident saying it's in. But a lot can change between now and then, so that could change. But it's a safe type of film. It's the type of film that 30 years ago, and in the 90s, it's kind of a throwback film to the way films were made in that era, I think. And he even shot it on film, 35 millimeter, I think, film, so that it would have the kind of grainy throwback look to it. But yeah, really good movie.
Yes, agreed. And it's the kind of movie that it's the kind of movie you know exactly where it's going pretty much after the first 15 or 20 minutes, but you're okay with that because it's so well done to get you there. Like it's funny, it's poignant, it's just a really great film. I hope people check it out when it comes out in theaters. I believe it's coming out limited release end of October, more and then we'll go wider, I think, over the Thanksgiving holiday. I hope that that's the case because it's definitely a holiday kind of film.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So after that, we were treated with the world premiere of Naiad. From
Yes.
I'm gonna put you on the spot. It's directors Jimmy Chin and Jimmy
Elizabeth
Chin's wife,
Chai Vasaheli or something. I
Chai.
can never
That's
say it
right.
right, but yeah, Chai. Yeah.
Who were Academy Award. Did they win for The Rescue?
They no, they weren't even nominated,
Free Solo.
unfortunately. It missed Doc, but they won for Free Solo. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they were documentary filmmakers who are making their feature film debut in this story of Diana Nyad, who was the Olympic swimmer who at 64 made the swim from Cuba to Florida. There's a lot of controversy around this film. The film doesn't necessarily talk about it, and honestly, I don't even nobody can say for sure, but Diana Nyad and a couple of other people, whether or not that journey was actually made. What I will say is that the spirit of the film is about never giving up, about never letting anything hold you back, whether it's age, whether it's fitness, or anything like that. Don't let anything hold you back.
Sex, right?
What's that?
The fact that
Oh yeah,
sex, like the fact
gender.
that
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
a woman, gender, sorry. I think that plays a big part of it too. Is you know, this she's trying to accomplish something that was basically deemed impossible to be done. I mean,
Right.
she's going to swim 60 some hours at the age of 64, 110 some miles, and it's never been done. And it takes her, I don't want to play spoiler, but this is based on a true story, so
Yes.
some, we're saying is not really spoilers. But it took her multiple times to do it. She failed many times, including when she was younger and in the best shape of her life. She failed, right? So to
Right.
try it 30 years later, all the odds are against you kind of film. And I think because of that, it really builds a lot of tension, even if you know how it's going to end. And you could tell, I mean, I know I was kind of on the edge of my seat watching it, and it's kind of like The Rescue that these filmmakers made a couple of years ago. Pretty much most of us know how these stories end, but you're still sitting there like, I hope it happens. And when it does, the crowd Telluride, which this doesn't happen, I don't think too often, they kind of erupted
Hmm.
when it reaches its climax. And I think a lot of that is not just due to the great story that it is, but it's also, I think, the performances of Annette Bening and Jodie Foster in the main role. Jodie plays her kind of like lifelong best friend partner, and swim coach, and Reese. I can't say his name either. Reese Ifans, I think is how you say it. He's the
Sounds
navigator
good.
on the ship. That was close. All three of them are really terrific. But I know a lot of people, most people are gravitating toward Jodie Foster, but I think it's because I love Annette Bening so much and I want her to
Hmm.
win so much. She's never won an Oscar, and I think she was exceptional, and it's the type of performance I think they can win. And there's a lot of really good lead actress performances. We're going to talk about at least one or two of them in a minute, but I could see a narrative where Annette Bening wins for this.
Sure. It's a little bit of a female Rocky story. I mean, if you want to,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Sure, I can
I
see that.
think there are some things that hold it back. And by the way, I think it was very brave to premiere this film at a film festival because you do put it in front of
Yeah.
a certain audience that expects not necessarily a crowd pleasing, heart tugging film like this. So King Richard, did premiere 2 years ago at Telluride, but traditionally it's much more arty fare, independent foreign films. So it's brave to show a film like this because you kind of set yourself up for a harsh reaction to more cynical audiences. But I think, as you said, the audience, they were right there with it. They clapped at certain scenes, so that's a good sign. Um, I'm in the Jodie Foster camp, but I think that Annette Bening is very good. It's just that
Yeah.
Jodie Foster gives such an earthy, lived-in, kind of naturalistic, real performance that sometimes I find that she's very studied. Like she gets a gimmick, like in Nell. She
Yeah.
grabs something for Nell, or and of course she's great in Silence of the Lambs, but she's very hard, she's very cold, she's very methodical, and then that's what the character required. But I don't see her often in sort of a warm role before, and I think that I really responded to that aspect of her performance here.
I think you could almost say it's her best performance in, I mean, quite some time, really,
Oh
I
yeah,
think.
absolutely.
So yeah, for sure. So I wouldn't argue. And I think they kind of both help each other get into the race, as well. I think if you vote for one, you probably vote for both. It's kind of one of those things, kind of like we'll talk about maybe Poor Things in a little bit with a couple of actors there. So we'll see. It's very interesting. I could see the film kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier. I could see it missing, but it'd be hard to see Jodie missing, I think, at this point. But
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see. It's definitely, like you said, it's definitely more of a crowd film than it is a critics film. So the reviews, I think, were a little mixed out of Telluride, but I think it's going to play a lot better with audiences than it maybe would have at Telluride.
And I do think people will respond to the Annette Bening story, and kind of particularly
Mhm.
what I wanted from what I hope comes out of this is you start to hear more about the physicality, the physical requirements of being in the water, like what
Right.
she had to go through. I'm not, like a Natalie Portman in Black Swan narrative where she
Yeah.
had to learn, and I'm sure Annette Bening had to learn how to swim like a professional swimmer. That's just not something you just hop in the water and do. Like I'm sure she had to do a lot
Yeah.
of training and that kind of thing. So I think that's going to be really key in her narrative this year. So that was Naiad, and then Saturday morning we got up for a happy little film called Zone of Interest, which is not a happy little film at
Perfect way
all.
to start your day.
Yeah, it's Jonathan Glazer, a director who, after you and I talked about this quite a bit actually on Saturday, is a Kubrick. I swear is a Kubrick disciple. I don't know that he
Yeah.
is. I haven't heard of those compare. I mean, the certain comparisons are certainly there. I haven't heard him talk about it, but he makes this film based on a novel, but it is a film about a family who, the husband of which the father of the family, the works in Auschwitz during World War II, and they live next to Auschwitz. And there's a phrase that's been tossed around about this film. It's about the banality of evil, and technically, I guess that's pretty much the best way to describe it, but
It really is, right?
it really is. And it's
How else do
essentially
you
just
describe this?
what's that?
How else do you describe this since we keep hearing
I
that same damn line?
I
But
know, and
yeah,
I don't want to say it again and again and again, but it really is watching this family um live their lives,
yeah,
have parties,
day to
raise
day.
children, children fight each other, children play with each other. They the mother of the family, played by Sandra Hüller, uh tries on a fur coat. Of course, that fur coat was a stolen from a Jewish woman who very likely is burned in Auschwitz, or very likely dies, but we don't know. That's the kind of film that you're looking at. The one scene that continues to resonate with me, there's several things that stuck with
Yeah.
me. One scene that did was there's a birthday, there's maybe it wasn't the birthday party scene, but it was the family's out in the backyard and they have a pool in the backyard. And while they're swimming in the
Mhm.
pool and going down the slide, there's a train that's going along the background, and you see it in the distance. You see the smoke from the stack. You don't see anything in the train. You don't see the train except for the smoke, but this is a
Yeah.
train bringing Jewish prisoners to the Auschwitz camp to essentially die. That's the kind of film this is.
So Glazer sometimes will linger with, yeah, film was cold. He lingers with scenes. A lot of people like how he holds those scenes longer. It can feel a little bit tedious at times otherwise. But the more I thought about the film, the more I let it sit and simmer. And this is the hard part about going to a film festival. You
Mm-hmm.
take in all these movies in a short period of time, and you're expected to have a reaction right away and tweet about it and whatnot. And some movies, that's just not possible. This is one of those. You need to let it permeate and simmer and all those things. And the more I've thought about it, the more I talked to other people who had seen it, the more I grew to appreciate it a little bit. And there are, like you mentioned, there are quite a few scenes that are fascinating in lots of subtle ways. And I don't want to spoil anything, but I'll use one of there's an older brother and a younger brother that are kind of screwing around in the yard, and
Mm-hmm.
the older brother forces the younger brother into this greenhouse in their yard, and he like locks him in there, and you can kind of get that sense of this is like him in training to become a Nazi, like he's doing to his brother. He's like imprisoning him. There's just that kind of
In a gas
comparison there, and
chamber.
it's, yeah, like in the gas
Yeah.
chamber, right? So,
Yeah.
and I don't want to spoil anything, but there's also a sequence at the end I thought that was really fascinating too. So it's one of those movies that I have to see it again now, knowing what I saw and
Yes.
talking to people about it, and I think I'll have a even deeper appreciation the next time.
It played today was as we were recording, today's the opening day of the Toronto International Film Festival, and it was one of the earlier films to screen, and I'm very
Okay.
happy. It's a good thing for this film that they got an early slot, because you're absolutely right. This is the downside of a film festival. Of course,
Mhm.
everybody wants to rush and see things as much as you can, but sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes you just can't possibly see 3 to 4 films in a day mentally, emotionally. You can't engage with everything. And so I'm glad that this film is being seen early. I think it's important for this film to be seen early. It's not that it can't compare to other films. It's just this kind of film that you just kind of want to sit with, as you said. It needs to resonate with you, and then you need to kind of get it out of your system so that you can go and appreciate something else. Because this is a very, I mean, I don't want to call it an important film in terms of just kind of as a downside, but it is a very important film. It is a very unique Holocaust film.
Yeah.
It's just, it's all about the banality of evil. So what can you do?
And you can't say that about too many Holocaust films, right? There's a lot of really great Holocaust films, but a lot of the themes seem to be similar. And this is definitely, oh, I don't even want to say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. It's kind of like a fresh take on the Holocaust. Is that terrible
No,
to
I
say?
don't
That
think that's
sounds
wrong.
terrible.
No,
But
I don't
it's
think
kind
that's
of like
wrong. I
a,
mean, it's not the
yeah,
kind of film where you're going to see people shot. You're not going to see people
yeah,
beaten or raped or burned to death. You're not going to see bodies. There are other things out there that have that. There are documentaries out there that have that. I mean, if that's what you
yeah,
want, there's other places to get that. This is asking you to, and what I think I kind of took from this the most, and I put this in my review on the site, is that what you take away from this film as you're walking away is that by setting it in the Holocaust, but not making it about the Holocaust, you make this the universal. You bring this message. You make it more universal. You make it. This could be any genocide. I mean, yes, it is reference to the Holocaust. Yes, there are Jewish prisoners that you do see the yellow star on their outfits, but it could just as easily have been the Civil War in America. It just could have easily been, Darfur or any other genocide that happens in the world even today. And it's asking you, do not look away from evil. And I think that's such an important message.
absolutely.
Um,
What's
awards wise,
next?
well, awards
Oh, go
wise, I
ahead,
want
go
to
ahead, go
say
ahead.
this is
Yeah,
this is going to be a contender all year. I mean, it was a runner up. It was
yeah.
basically number 2 at the Cannes Film Festival. We'll talk about what was the winner of the Palme d'Or in just a minute, or at least you will. And I think, I say this is in the top 10 for Oscar Best Picture. I think Jonathan Glazer has that foreign slot. Um, I could even see a case where you and I had a conversation with one of the publicists that will be handling this film, and she was asking where we thought Sandra Hüller, um, would land. And I think, if you put her in supporting, I mean, I think, she has a shot at getting nominated. I don't think she will. There's a pretty tough competition for that category. There's a lot of great acting performances this year, but I think, I don't think it's getting. I think this is going to be remembered all year.
Yeah. There's no question, I think, that it'll be remembered all year. It's going to be interesting to see how it can crack the top 10 and if it making the top 10 bumps another foreign language film that we may talk about here in a minute out,
Yes.
or if two could get in. And right now I'm betting on the other one, but I mean, I could see both getting in, or I could see Glazer getting kind of that. It doesn't happen that often now that we're up to 10, but he could get that sole director kind of thing without the
Mhm.
film getting it. But it'll be interesting to see for sure, because it's not a film I think that gets in if people only give it one shot. I
Right.
think it's definitely the film that the more I think you see it, the more you study it, it will grow.
I think the next thing we saw was All of Us Strangers,
Yeah,
and I don't remember. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the director. It's the director of Weekend
Andrew
and
Hay.
before Andrew Hay,
Yeah,
who was there to present the film. It stars Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal, Jamie Bell, and Claire Foy in a kind of a ghost story. A little bit of romance in there, a little bit of longing and depression and sadness, and essentially not a traditional ghost story. A ghost story more along the lines of that movie from a couple of years ago, Gall Ghost Story, where you saw the ghost in the window with the sheet over him. I mean, it's kind of a Andrew Scott is essentially a writer who is trying to write a screenplay about his parents, who have died 30 years prior to the era of the film. And he needs to go out and clear his head. He happens to walk by his childhood home, or he walks by his childhood home deliberately, and lo and behold, his parents were there, and alive, and living as if they were still in the 1980s. And of course, they are ghosts. Um, so there's a lot to take in there. What was your take on this? I don't remember what you thought about All of Us
Hmm.
Strangers.
I liked it a lot. I thought it was very sad and
Mm-hmm.
very beautiful, and I think it's a love story first, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
with him and Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal, and they're both terrific. But Andrew Scott's never been better. He's the lead in it, and I thought he was terrific. There's what I found was interesting about All of Us Strangers was when talking to people about it again after. It's one of the best parts of the festival is you get to talk to other cinephiles and people who love movies as well. And one of the things I thought was interesting was all the different angles people around me were kind of like the perspectives they had from it. One of my pals is gay and took from it the angle of the challenges of coming out to your parents.
Right.
One of my pals, and not this wasn't you, but that would also apply to you, lost a parent this recently, and I know that they took it from that angle and had a hard time. It was it's a very challenging film in a lot of ways. For me, I took it from the angle of the parents, right, with their kids, and there's been many times, especially my younger son Luke, where I've thought about how great it would be to be the same age with him, because
Mm-hmm.
him and I have a lot of things in common, imagination and uh, oddities and things like that. So I've many times thought about how awesome and interesting it would be to be the same age, mostly as his at his age, a child, but
Right.
also there's that aspect of like being my age at the same time. And I don't want to get into any spoilers or anything, but there's a scene that just like broke my heart and
Yeah.
was, it's the only time I cried at Telluride this year was that scene. And you know um it was just a powerful film and beautiful story.
Yeah. I was a little, I mean, I like the film. I was a little bit more lukewarm on it.
Okay.
As you mentioned, I recently lost my mother, and I did cry in this one because I really connected into that sort of uh, that reconnection of a and it's not the same thing because I didn't lose my mother 30 years ago, right? I mean, she had died 5 weeks before Telluride, but it did make me think about what would I say to her if she all of a sudden were back. And From that perspective, I thought it was touching. But what I'll say is, I
So do
think,
we want to talk about awards chances?
yeah, I was gonna hop right into that, and I think Andrew Scott could have that Paul Mescal slot.
No, God,
From
sorry.
Sorry, you got a little bit of a delay. Paul Mescal could, I mean, Andrew Scott could have the Paul Mescal slot that he had in After Sun last year.
Possible for sure. I don't know that it's much of an awards player. It seems like the type of film that's too small, and uh, but that's what After Sun felt like too. So, like you said, so
Mhm.
yeah, it's definitely possible, and I'd be happy about it. Just when Sweet Bumps Out's becoming very crowded in the two lead actor and actress categories. So yeah, I don't know what to make of it yet. So right now, I wouldn't be picking it for anything other than maybe again screenplay. Um, so we'll see. It's tough one to put in my lists, except for On the Radar at this point.
So we've got two more films to talk
Okay.
about that we both have seen, at least in parts, and then we're going to be starting to fade. I know I've lost. We're recording later at night, and I've lost a lot of the light, so I'm starting to get really dark myself. We
Let's
we
just
saw,
jump right to the awards players then.
yeah. Let's talk about Poor Things. Which I think, for my
Yeah,
mind, I mean, everybody knows what Poor Things is at this point. But for my mind, that is the biggest awards player of the festival. It's Yorgos Lanthimos, it's Emma Stone, Mark Ruffalo, Willem Dafoe. Screenplay by Emmy and I think Tony winner Tony McNamara. Um, Production design, just below the line crafts. I mean, you talked about this on a recent All This in the Oscars 2 podcast, where you thought this was going to be a huge contender for production design. I mean, below the line crafts Oscars. I think you're absolutely right. I think this is a double digit Oscar nominee.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, I'm going to pat myself on the back a minute because we miss a lot of things, but sometimes we get stuff right. And not that we're right yet, but it's looking good. I had this in my number 5 spot very early on, along with like, Carmen Maestro. But I had things in that same realm because of what it looked like it could be. First of all, the director, Yorgos Lanthimos, what he did with The Favorite very well could have turned around again here. You knew coming in with the trailer, production design, costumes, makeup. It has Emma Stone giving maybe her best career performance. Mark Ruffalo for sure giving his career best performance. Willem Dafoe being pretty outstanding as well. And so you get the feeling that it was going to be up for a lot of nominations, and a lot of nominations oftentimes also translates to a Best Picture nominee, especially in a field of bizarre movie. This one this one says, "Hey, Saltburn, hold my beer," and
that should be on the
kind of
poster.
pushes the
Saltburn,
envelope
hold
even
my
further.
beer.
It's right. It's incredible, but it's also very perverse and diabolical and yeah,
But I'm a little bit worried that
yeah.
that it is a lot for audiences to take. Um, and you say The Favorite got 10 nominations, but this is much tougher than The Favorite, in my opinion. But it's a hugely entertaining film. I thought maybe it was about 15-20 minutes too long, but it's a film that I definitely will see again. And outside of the
Yeah,
push of the awards race, and it's not the awards race, but the push of Telluride, I'm sure it will fly by for me on a second viewing.
yeah. It's extremely entertaining and funny and
Hmm.
fun, and so yeah, it's long, and I agree. There's some scenes in the second act, I think that could have been cut or reduced, and I don't want to get too much into that on this show, but
Um,
you know, it's definitely one that people will talk about, if nothing else.
Absolutely. So I'm going to turn it over to you because you saw the last film that we're going to talk about here. You did see other films, and if you'd like to see the other films that if you'd like to hear about the other films that Mark saw, you can go onto awardsdaily.com and read his Telluride Diaries, where he goes into detail about the last couple of smaller films that he saw. But why don't you tell us about Anatomy of a Fall?
Anatomy of a Fall, Anatomy of a Fall, which I keep messing up and calling Anatomy of a Murder, is about a woman whose husband falls to his death, and based on the way that he fell and some questionable marks on the head, they can't rule out third party involvement. So she is a suspect, and of course, as the spouse, she is the prime suspect. And so, what kind of starts a little bit as a did she do it, did she not do it, transitions into a really intense and dramatic courtroom drama. And Sandra Hula, who we talked about from Zone of Interest, remarkable. There's just a lot going on in the performance, from flashbacks to scenes with her son, to scenes in the courtroom where she's very cold, and you're always kind of left, did she do it or did she not do it? I'm not sure what it is, and it'll leave you theorizing and having. I know I have a lot of thoughts, which I won't go into on this podcast. Maybe when we do a spoiler type, oh, and plus you haven't seen it right all the way through, so I definitely don't want to spoil that. So but she's terrific, and as good as Emma Stone is, and fine, she was the best performance at the festival, along with Annette Bening. I think you have to say Huler's there as well. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I haven't updated my actress predictions since the festival, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to have her in my 5 for that, along with Bening and Stone. So if we got anything at Telluride, I think we got a preview of a lot of the best actress contenders.
I agree. And I know a few minutes ago you started saying, I think you were referencing the fact that you would say Anatomy of a Fall would be in your 10, not necessarily Zone of Interest, not as confident in that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I did update my I did update my picture and director. I have to get to the rest here soon, but I did put Anatomy of a Fall, and I do have it number 8 right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have Zone of Interest yet. I think I have it like 11 or 12. But I could definitely see both getting in. But if I'm gonna bet on one, I just think Anatomy of a Fall is. I don't know. I guess I preferred it over Zone of Interest, and so I'm rooting for it. And I just think her performance is the type of performance that could really get it in. And this is the film that won the Palm, right, over Zone.
Right. Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
it did
Sandra
well with
Hüller,
Dan.
what I've seen of it so far is Sandra Hüller is fantastic, and the screenplay is tremendous. I think that's a huge contender for original screenplay. Written by the director and her husband, which I'm not even going to go into all the psychology behind that, but
Right.
it's the only thing that I would say that puts Zone of Interest, and again, I haven't seen the whole film, so take this with a grain of salt, but the only thing that I will say that puts Zone of Interest over Anatomy of a Fall in terms of best picture for me is the fact that Zone of Interest has a broader social message to it. It has a broader impact. Anatomy of a Fall is an extraordinarily well crafted legal procedure, essentially. And it doesn't, at least in the pieces that I've seen, it doesn't kind of take it beyond that, right? It kind of reminded me of something like Jagged Edge from the 80s, but not with all the sex. It's kind of
no sex.
Yeah, no sex. But it doesn't have that sort of, it is important, it has heft, but it doesn't have that best picture heft, if you know what I mean. That something like Zone of Interest would.
Yeah.
Because it is about,
I can see that,
the banality of evil.
Right. I mean, how can you compete with the banality of evil?
Can't.
But I do think both films are, I'll say they're the two smartest films that we saw at Telluride. And I think they're the most thought-provoking and, conversation building. Obviously you're going to talk about Saltburn and Poor Things, but it's more of a holy shit, what did we just see kind of conversation. Whereas Anatomy of a Fall and Zone of Interest, you want to delve into the mind of, the characters and the filmmakers. It's just, different theories and different symbolism and things that you took from it. And so they're both very, very good movies. And sure, they could both be in the best picture race, and hell, the directors could be in, the actors could be in. It could be interesting to see how, we've gotten a little bit more build from the international branch over the past few years. We've seen the impact BAFTA has had in recent times. So sure, I think both could get in,
Yeah. So I think we should wrap. It was a fantastic festival. It was great to see you. It was great hanging out with you. I hope that we get to do it again very soon at the Middleburg Film Festival in Middleburg, Virginia.
Me too.
And of course, apologies to viewers for my lack of lighting and your internet.
And my goddamn internet.
We're not used to being on camera. We're more voices for podcasts, I think. But we'll get better at this as we go. And again, go back and read Mark's festival diary to kind of get a better understanding of all of the films that he connected with over the festival. And then, of course, listen to All This and the Oscars Too, the podcast at Awards Daily with Sasha. And you can hear her takes on the films that she saw pretty soon as we do a group recording, and where she thinks films will land out of the Telluride. Out of the Telluride Film Festival in the Oscar race. This is certainly just our takes. This is not representative of Sasha. Obviously, she's got much bigger, much deeper thoughts on it than we do.
She's the queen. Right?
She is the queen. All right. Well, Mark, it's great to see you. It's time for me to head home.
Too.
I probably should get back to work. Stop hanging out in Telluride.
And I got to go to bed because I'm old and it's getting late. So
good seeing you. I'm not even going to tell people what time it is, so then they can make fun of you. All right, Mark. Take it easy.
All right. See you.
Bye.